Welcome. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to create and publish your podcast. It's free. That's right, free to download. With built-in tools to help you record and edit your podcast from your cell phone or any smart device. Anchor also distributes your podcast on virtually any platform that streams podcasts, like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple and Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even monetize your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is your one-stop app for podcasting. Remember, it's free. Go to anchor.fm to create some amazing content. Powered by Riverside. Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we have uncensored conversations. That's right. If you got any kids in the room, you might want to put them in another room because this is adults talking to adults. This podcast is not set up for children because of the content. So, again, uncensored conversations. We exchange information. No therapy here, folks. No therapy. And we have a ton of resources for all the listeners. We are produced by Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. We are sponsored by Anchor. We are streaming on all major platforms. So wherever you get your favorite podcast platform, that's where we are. And we also have these interviews available via video on Spotify. You don't even have to pay for the Spotify. You can just use the free one. Or you can watch them on our YouTube channel, Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. Please leave a review, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. We got a very special guest in the building. Her lovely face is on the screen. So if you're not watching, you're not going to see our wonderful guest. I want to give you some disclaimers before we get started, just some housekeeping stuff, and then we're going to go ahead and just dive right on in. So if you are triggered at any point during this podcast, and I mean at any point, call 911. That starts the documentation process. That starts you to get all the help that you need, because those 911 operators, the technical term is emergency medical dispatchers, they are mandated reporters like me, your fire medic brother. If you don't have an immediate need, but you still need help, in every episode, we have a bunch of resources listed in the show. Call 988 if you have suicidal tendencies, suicidal issues, suicidal ideation, know somebody that's suicidal, or even if you've seen somebody that has suicidal issues. 988. That number is toll-free, available 24/7, and it will help you with some behavioral health concerns also. If you have other issues that you need help with because you're triggered, like substance abuse issues, it could be alcohol or drugs, we have 3 numbers and websites for you. We have the numbers for Al-Anon for the supporters, Alcoholics Anonymous if you have drinking issues, and then Narcotics Anonymous if you have substance abuse issues. We also provide 3 numbers and websites for any other issue that we cover. And we cover 4 topics here. Domestic violence, we have that number and website. Human and sex trafficking, we have that number and website. Sexually based offenses, we refer you to an organization called RAIN, which stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. So we cover all the bases, folks. We want you to know that we are very hypersensitive to the content and the conversations that we have on this platform. I want to introduce my special guest, Gina Catherine. She is a certified sex, love, and relationship coach and is passionate about passion. She's like me. I speak with passion from a compassionate point of view. Or you can flip it. I speak with compassion from a passionate point of view. Gina believes that you're worthy of big love, epic sex, and deeply connected relationships. We're going to talk about these things. Y'all in for a treat today. I'm telling you. Success is sex, love, and relationships is at the core of success in self-love. She says the sweetest and most powerful path to self-love is through the body. And her coaching and ethos revolves around reconnecting to the wisdom, the pleasure, and the power of the body. Gina Catherine.
Yay.
What's going on, my friend?
LP, I love how protective you are of the listeners. I love how supportive you are to like include everybody. And so I just wanted to honor that. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy we met. We've had some amazing,
Oh,
um, pretty amazing conversations and have listened in together on other amazing conversations. So I'm really happy to hear anything you want to ask me or anything you're excited about, and dive in. I always learn so much from you as well.
thank you so much. And you are such an open book. I always tell people that when it comes to questions, I'll answer a question, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, because that's how we understand each other. That's how we get information. Again, Trigger One and Talk podcast. This is uncensored conversation. So if you hear some F bombs, some curse words, some adult content, that's what we do. We don't block out anything. There's not going to be a 7-second delay and all that stuff or whatever. I always say we do real conversation. Fluff is an action word. That's what you do to pillows and shit. That's what you add on top of cappuccinos and shit. You know what I mean? So
That's right.
we met in Clubhouse. And if you have not joined Clubhouse and know what it is, it's a social media app. It's free. The computer or laptop version of that is called Club Deck. So if you have a Windows laptop or computer, if you have a MacBook like I have, and you want to go onto Clubhouse, download the Club Deck app. It gives you some more options, but it does the same thing, but Clubhouse. And we met in a number of different rooms that deal with trigger warning conversations, deal with mental health issues. I wanted to have you on the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, Gina, specifically because you're a certified sex, love, and relationship coach. And you talk about that, you focus on that. You have a podcast called The One Podcast. We'll talk about that towards the end on the screen. And again, folks, I got to start watching these interviews too. You can listen to them, please do. I'm just saying, for extra content, please go and watch these on Spotify and our YouTube channel because I got a bunch of graphics on here that you're not going to be able to see just listening. You also deal with metaphysics. And I am a proponent of people like yourself who deal with metaphysical modalities. I've interviewed Reiki practitioners, NLP, EFT, tapping. I've done that on an episode. We have interviewed people that do breath work. I've done a breath work session on there, cognitive behavior and EMDR and different things like that. I interviewed a woman who she helps clients that have been survivors of domestic violence and trafficking and sexually based offenses. She's been doing work for 30 years with clients. You know what she does? Crystals and tarot card readings.
Yeah.
So I say I focus a lot more on metaphysical modalities when it comes to these traumas compared to the Western medicines, and they have their place. Medication has its place. Western medicine has its place. I say, you know what? You need to have the whole basket, not just one egg. So we're
Yeah.
going to get to what you do specifically and how that ties into domestic violence and sexually based offenses.
Yeah, totally. I just wanted to say really quick to piggyback on what you said about being an open book. And I
Mhm.
think that having an understanding of psychology, of science-based modalities, and also the metaphysical realm, the body, mindfulness, EMD, like all of the things you mentioned, um, creates this ability to feel safe, right? To feel like no matter what someone asks me, I feel so rock solid in my ability to either say, oh, I have no idea, or I've never thought about that. Or so a lot of these insecurities have fallen away that I used to have when I was only in my head, right? I only used academia or thoughts and things to sort of run my life. And the reason I'm so passionate about breath work and the body and sexuality as a tool for healing is because I was plateaued at my understanding of so many things and was only able to move forward with both of them. So I loved what you said about not one is necessarily better than the other. These are not mutually exclusive. It's just like, what else? What else can you ask me? What else can we use? What else can we get curious about? So I just wanted to full-heartedly agree with what you just said. I'm totally keen on the tarot. I've been helped by energetic cord cuttings, by I've gotten some tarot readings that have been instrumental in me connecting to my own wisdom for my business, and probably would have taken me years to have illuminated what was holding me back. That took me 45 minutes from a tarot reading.
You know, Gina, I interview, and I don't know if you know who she is. Her name is Heather Tucker. She's a sex coach. I met her on Clubhouse. Definitely, and I'll send you the link to the interview that I did with Heather. She's a Christian sex coach.
Yeah. Oh,
She,
yeah.
yeah, she is phenomenal. And so some of the things that you focus on in your coaching, she talked about those too. But I want to talk to you about your perspective in relationship to these two topics, like I did with her. And
Yeah.
again, we want to do different stuff than you see in other podcasts and other platforms out there. So how did you even get started as a sex, love, and relationship coach? Is that 3 different certifications? Is that all 3 in one?
It's all in one. So mine is all in one, and it was through the Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality.
Okay.
In 2018, I got my certification, and part of the draw in from this is the idea that in Tantra we are there is a wholeness that we already are, and that all we have to do is practice removing what is between feeling that, right? So in some philosophies like Buddhism, they call it a mulla, or something that's that is blocking me from understanding like who I really am, right? Because I used to not like so many things about myself. I had a false confidence. I was very cut off. And I started meditating about 15 years ago. And this is really when like the inner journey started for me. And I folded a lot of things in. I had a serious illness. I had a cancer diagnosis, and I had a child who died. I had a baby that died, was stillborn. And these two things just had me like in this downward spiral that completely numbed me off. Like, so I was really numb in my body. I didn't have this passion that we were talking about, like how you're passionate about what your work is. And I thought, okay, there's something wrong with me. And the idea that I had to go through talk therapy, which I love talk therapy. I think that there is so much value in this, but that I would have to go through talk therapy and find out more things to dislike about myself, that I was very attracted to the teachings of Layla Martin and this Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality, because every single thing that the Tantric philosophy talks about is how to love yourself more, how to give yourself more compassion. And it came from a trauma background, this certification. So I'm very trauma informed in that I know how to hold people. I know how to recognize people who are in trauma. I'm very informed on what that looks like and how to make decisions and how to ask and communicate and get curious with somebody who I'm working with, because I did this over and over again with myself, right? Well, this is a trauma response that I'm doing. This is, and it showed up for me in different ways. And so I chased it around with my mind as it morphed, like from using humor, from shutting down, from fawning all over people, from, like it morphed. And because I was trying to chase it around in talk therapy. And so when I learned practices on how to recognize like nervous system regulation, how to get myself out of a reactive state and operate from having all of my tools accessible to me, is really when I felt that move forward for me. I felt like this blooming, this blossoming that then brought back this passion, this turn on, not just for partnered sex, not just for my own pleasure, but for everything, for tea, for music, for dancing. What was shut down in me before was my connection to my body. And so this is where it started. This journey started in this reconnection that I had personally. And then I was very motivated. It's like this, like you think, wait, it's this, like I can just do like these modalities, like I can do these practices every day for 30 days and feel like this, like nobody has to, I don't have to go to therapy for 9 years. I don't have to, like learning all of these things. And then I thought, of course, I have to tell other people, right? Other people need to know what this feels like. And so that's when I started on the journey of coaching. And somebody asked me once, do you do these things because you're a coach? And then I answered, no, I coach because I do these things and they work and they're just so beautiful. So this is where my journey from through healing went, right? And I talk about and teach things that when I'm in session with people, they literally open their eyes like they've never felt that before. And it starts off as a little spark and then they grow it in practice. So it's just something I'm so excited about because it's, once you get coaching around it, and you get some guidance and learn the tools, it's free. It's not LSD. It's not a juice fast. You can do it anytime. And that's true empowerment, right? So that's why. And the focus on sexuality for me came through in, I'm a huge believer in these chakras and the system. And so for me, what I see in a lot of people, women in particular, but men too, is that this sacral chakra is blocked. So connection, creativity, sexuality, and sensuality is blocked, and therefore you're either thinking in your head or your gut, or you're not feeling safe, right? It blocks your feeling of safety to your mind. It's this disconnection. So the sacral is just the second one up, and so it's, if you're blocked there, you're blocked from a lot of life's pleasure. And so I have found many times that helping people connect to these things that live there in the sacral chakra really creates this energetic flow that they're magnetic. Like people, you notice people who are free, who are free from a lot of this, is you're not always sure, but you can sense something about them. It's this, again, this energetics, right? That is, yeah.
This is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, sponsored by Anchor, produced by Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. We're streaming on all major platforms. Wherever you get your favorite podcast platform, we're on there. We have a video version of each interview, and that's on Spotify, as well as our YouTube channel, Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. Our guest today is Gina Catherine, sex, love, and relationship coach. We're going to have some very intense conversations today. If you're triggered at any point during this podcast, check the resources for each interview in the show notes. Call 911. That's the start if you need immediate help. Call 988 if you have any suicidal issues. And again, we're going to have some real talk here, folks. Gina, I want to jump right into the meat and potatoes section of the podcast. You said that you were in a sexless marriage. How long did that last?
Oh, well, I was married for 20 years, and I would say the last 6 were not without passion, but without, I would, sexless is kind of so low sex or sexless, but
Okay.
so that lasted a long time and was damaging for both of us, right? It was confusing, it was muddy and disconnecting. It's relationships are not about sex, but unless you can talk about sex, unless you have intimacy with your romantic partner, these are difficult to sustain for the long term. So, yeah.
I did a room, or I was part of a room recently, and we talked about friendships. We talked about how, especially in an intimate partner, and specifically with marriages, but not exclusively with marriages. And one of the things that a lot of us that are married said is that you can be married all day and twice on Sunday, but if you don't like your wife or your spouse, you're just legally married. And one of the things that we talked about was I did an episode that's coming out soon. It's called The Contracts, the Abuses, and the Resolutions. I broke down the term of contracts, what a contract is. Contract is very simple: offer and acceptance and consideration. And what I said is that outside of a domestic partnership, outside of a marriage, those are legally binding contracts. You have to sign a piece of paper. It has to be approved by a state agency or government agency and different things like that. You get a certification. Anything outside of that, you're just in a relationship with somebody. And so that's a contract also. It's a verbal, it's an oral contract. It's not on paper. The same principles apply though in terms of it's an offer and acceptance and consideration. If So before you and your husband got married, when you first met and decided to become a couple, I don't know who proposed the idea first, but let's say he proposed to you in terms of, hey, I want you to be my woman. I want you to be my lady, or whatever he said. That was the offer. You said yes or whatever you said to agree to it. That was the acceptance. The consideration is, let's talk about the boundaries. Let's talk about what's going to keep us together, what may break us up. So, no cheating, no lying, can't put your hands on me outside of the bedroom, stuff. Um, you know, don't kick my dog, make sure you put the cap on the toothpaste, lift the seat up, or, stuff like that. Those are the considerations.
Yeah.
And I say that, and in part being funny, but in part I'm being serious, because those things lead to bigger and better problems if they're not talked about just on a basic level. The consideration to me is the most important. It's easy to get together. You can meet anybody anywhere, whether it's on Tinder, at a bar, at church, or whatever. Hey, I like you. You like me? Yeah. Let's be a couple. Okay. Now what? So when we're talking about sex, love, and relationships, how does your practice with your clients deal with those issues from a contractual standpoint?
Yeah. Well, I try not to think of things in a contractual standpoint, right? Like, and here's why. Because there are so many limits on us. We have these limiting beliefs. So society, religion, our parents, the media, movies, porn, whatever, give us this idea of how we should act in romantic partnership. And
Okay.
nobody ever teaches us the skills of what do I want? What do I want the container to look like, right? The contract, like, are we going to live together? Are we going to be legally married? Are we going to split the finances? Are we going to split the chores? Is one person going to stay home with the kids? Like, all of that stuff is not a one-time conversation. So
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
contract, yeah. And so intimacy happens when you know yourself, right? And you know yourself so well. You know, somebody said like, can you give me one piece of advice? No, I can't give you one thing. If you're looking for one nugget to have a successful, I'm talking about like you just said, you could just meet anybody and like bop around with them, hang out and have it explode later when you can't take it anymore. But if you want to have ease and passion and this transformation that really good, beautiful, deep relationships can bring, like they have the potential to heal our childhood wounds if there are two willing people, right? So, and they also need to be self-aware or at least be willing to talk about, you get so impatient when ... right? Can we talk about this a little bit more? And instead of somebody saying like, oh, you're so critical and huffing off, those relationships are so common. They just don't have the skills to stay in it and talk about, here are my triggers. They might not make any sense to you because you were raised differently or your relationship was very different. So self-awareness. So the first contract that I would do is, I promise to know me for you. I promise to understand and look at everything that's going on in my body and not to tell myself a story, but to ask myself what is going on right now. And, you know, when we talk about being triggered with people, my long-term relationship was that I would get triggered and I would shut down. And, we always said like, oh, we never fight. Okay, well, that's another way to kill a relationship, is to never disagree. And so knowing yourself, being vulnerable enough to share with somebody. So if Mrs. LP says like, okay, LP, this has nothing to do with you, but when you leave your towel on the bathroom, I mean, this is totally, listeners, made up in Gina's head. But if Mrs. LP has the self-awareness to say to you, this is a me thing, but we're together, may I share it with you? And how can you help me, right? Like what is some sort of new contract or compromise? And you could just be easily, oh, babe, no problem. I didn't even realize that bugged you. I'm going to pick that up every time so that you don't feel, right? There's always something else, right? What I talk about all the time is a communication as well. You need to be able to communicate these needs in a, when you do this, like I statements are not, I think you suck. Like people, you can turn an I statement into an accusation really quickly.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And so what I always say is like, say the thing and then how it makes you feel. So don't say like, you came home from work and you completely fucking ignored me, right? Like you're out of the blocks mad because that's how you felt. But what really happened is the person came in and they had their phone in front of their face the whole time, right? And so when you could say like, when you didn't put your phone, when you had your phone with you, when you said hello to me and you were looking at your phone, I felt so ignored, like, or I felt like I didn't matter enough for you to do this. And then it takes some of the charge out. You're not coming out of the blocks fighting. So you just say the objective truth. And then you say what you felt. And then the person has to be willing to make it only about your feelings, right? So awareness of your own feelings, awareness of how your partner's going to react to this. And you do this too, LP, I'm sure, like to triage this emergency. So I was in a relationship with a beautiful man who had abandonment issues. And I was very aware of this because he had shared them with me. And I held these issues very dear to me. And I was very careful not to trigger this sense of abandonment. And so my likelihood from my past of getting very upset and walking out of a room, which is toxic, right? Like And me trying to figure that out, I prioritized who's going to be most hurt here,
Right.
whose trauma matters most here, who is it a bigger deal? And sometimes it was his, right? And sometimes he did the same for me. And so this commitment to each other's wounding and the ability to communicate it and to do this regularly. And then my third piece of advice, if I may keep going, is to get out in front of it. And this is where I think people don't take advantage. They don't utilize like the ability to get out in front of it. So what I mean by this is before you get triggered, before you're to the point where you're feeling neglected or you're feeling numbed out and you don't want to have sex, or have these little rituals that connect you. And this is what I love about tantric philosophy too, is there are so many like really juicy practices to connect people in intimacy. And it doesn't have to be sexual. It is very often that you don't feel sexual because you don't feel connected. And I find that practicing this regularly, little practices, little rituals, little, with this same beautiful partner that I had, we had a ritual of every season, every time the season changed, we would meet together and we would have this little ritual of, how can I love you more?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, how can I love you more? And he would tell me, you could play cribbage with me more often. And I would say, thank you for that. How can I love you more? And he would say, you could instigate sex more. And I was never allowed as the receiving partner to say, what? I absolutely instigate. You don't respond. You say, thank you. How can I love you more? And then they just, whenever they're done, if you can see that they don't have something, you say, is that complete? And then I get to be asked. So then my partner asks me, how can I love you more? And I say the things that are on my heart. I say the things that are big and small, and they don't say it's just such a beautiful way to share these. There's no promise of I'm going to do them. There's no criticism of you don't do them. And it's this practice that really like fills you up with curiosity and this like tender fuel for going forward. And doing that quarterly, I think, is just such a beautiful practice, because then when you get to the point where somebody forgot to pick up the kids and it was your fault and it wasn't my fault, and those things get smoother, they get easier, you're less reactive. So
I'm so glad you said that. I'm trying to get Mrs. LP's attention since you brought her up. There's this game that she found, I believe it's called Monogamy. It's a big box board game, kind of like a Monopoly in a sense, and it's for couples, and it's a very intimate game where it's card based. You have a dice. I think it's one die, or it might be two dice. And the cards come in two stacks. They're different things that they, I think they're color coded or whatever.
Yeah.
And so one of the cards, when you land on something, you pick up the card and it might say, kiss your partner from head to toe. Another card might say, next week give your partner a massage. It's just stuff like that. And, we haven't played the game in a minute, but we used to play that game. And I thought, man, that was a great thing to purchase for us, because it keeps you in mind of, if I'm playing a game like that monogamy game, I'm probably not going to be yelling and screaming at you. I'm probably not going to be going upside your damn head. I'm probably not going to be walking out of the room. We're probably not going to be in an argument. I'm probably not going to be like, hey, you know what? I'm done with you. Let me take this ring off or whatever. because you're doing things intentionally for the relationship, not only building, because just because you're in a relationship don't mean that you don't continue building. You got the foundation, you just build upwards and outwards from that point. So
Yep.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I like what you said, these quarterly reevaluations on what the status is. The contract that I have with you, we can always add to it.
Yeah. How's
You
that going for you? How's it going for us? How's it,
know, yeah,
yeah, right? I mean, people do this with their employers and, they
absolutely.
get,
A
they get a
performance review. Mrs.
performance
LP
review.
just,
Yeah.
Mrs. LP just had her performance review. She's a project manager for a Fortune 100 company.
Yeah.
She got a huge bonus. She got far exceeds expectation. They don't even give that out. You
Right.
know what I
Right.
mean? It's just it's something to help not only you as the employee understand your role and how effective you are. Are you an asset? You just work here. Like seriously, like you just you know what I mean? Same thing
Mhm.
applies in a relationship. I want to move on to because we titled this episode Holistic First Responders. And I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you guys why. I'm a first responder. I'm married, but I'm a first responder. I'm a paramedic and firefighter. And so I think about the work that I used to do in the field on the ambulance and in the fire department of being that first responder. We get the 911 call, we get suited and booted, lights and sirens, and we go out. My job was to help people that were hurt, injured, dying, and dead. And my job also entailed me to be the eye in the hurricane of your emergency. Gina, I thought, wow, when I started doing research and I started having conversations with you and going in the rooms with you, I'm like, she's a first responder too, just on a holistic level. Holistic first responders. My ADD kicked in. I started mind mapping.
I know. I love it. I loved it. Yeah. Yeah.
So when we're talking about sexuality and healing modalities, what say you? What do you offer to your clients?
Yeah. So I love the holistic aspect too, because a lot of times we look at things and we think, I have to choose one, right? And so I always say, like, you get to choose in this present moment. People can know you and they can also like people can know you and also give you the space, if you will, to change your mind or to have this or have that. And so when we look at things holistically, so holistically, I mean, you're using all parts of yourself, right? Your brain, what some people think of as their soul, your heart, your
Yeah.
sexuality, your sense of safety, your sense of home, all of these things, like, have the ability to heal, and that um it's not linear. So a lot of people think that a lot of people come to me, a lot of my clients come to me, and they are either feeling no pleasure in their life in any way, shape, or form. So no sexual pleasure, but also like, yeah, that was good. They feel very meh, to use a 2000 and whatever
Yeah.
term. They feel kind of neutral, right? And so what happens is that we start to dive into, like, they maybe had something that caused them a lot of grief and they didn't have the tools to look at that. And so what happens is when you can't look at grief fully, you can't feel love and passion fully. And so the holistic idea, where you have the capacity, the ability to feel anger and let it go. You have the capacity to grieve and live in that grief with joy. Like, we're very limiting and narrow-minded in our idea of how to process things, that there's one way, especially in like keto world or something. Sorry for keto listeners, but you know what I mean? Like, people who go hard on one modality. And my whole coaching idea is, there is not one way. There is a wholeness that's in you, and your power comes in allowing that in every present moment. So being an amazing lover, number one thing is presence. Being an amazing communicator, the number one thing is presence. Feeling amazing sense of joy and passion and aliveness, the number one thing is presence. So my coaching revolves around, how do I feel safe enough? How do I let go of old shit to feel safe enough? Old stories, old pain, old wounds, old trauma.
Right.
How do I feel safe enough to be fully present right here in my body? And a lot of that takes practice. And, you know, one of the things I do, one of the things that really brought me from skeptic, like, yeah, it sounds good for other people, not for me. I'm too in my head. I'm too ADHD. I'm too smart. I'm too cerebral, right? Like, one of the things that really brought me to wanting this in my life and having it was this simple act of breast massage. And so men can do like testicle massage and women can do breast massage to like make you feel more connected to your own body. And it is a non-sexual practice. And so it's like, I have a link in my Instagram for a free tutorial for breast massage, because I you know, like, you can do this over your clothes, over your body. It is not, it's just this sense of connecting. If you thought about doing it, you don't really feel this connection. Do you see this? Like, is it on that? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so you, and then you like go into my thing and I send you the little video, but people can also DM me if they want it. And it's just this beautiful practice of offering yourself self-love. And one of the ways that I see in men and women and non-binary people is they're trying to love themselves without loving their bodies. They're trying to love, and so this gets a little tricky, right? If your body doesn't align with who you feel, what you feel is your gender, this is a different, like, that's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother inclusive, another inclusive conversation. So I just wanted to say, like, whenever I talk about men and women, I just want to include the awareness that this is not true for everyone, right? So, but like for you, I don't believe that we can have self-love without self-pleasure.
Okay.
And that part of that begins with just offering your body physical touch. And, you know, I was just say really quickly, like, I love the love languages. I think those have helped people to understand so much about themselves, but that too is limiting. And here's why. Because we think, oh, my two love languages are words of affirmation and physical touch, right? Like that's true for me in that this is how I like to receive love from a partner. What I hadn't looked at was, oh, I don't need gifts at all. I don't need like, I don't need gifts, right? Like, that was some sort of badge of honor. What I hadn't looked at was, why can't you receive? Why don't you allow people to do things for you? Why do you, right? Because it was a little bit of an awakening when I looked at these things that I really didn't want more closely and thought, with loving compassion, I wonder why. I wonder why you don't accept gifts very well. I wonder why it's hard for you, right? And so then I turned and did some work there, right? How can I allow myself to receive? How can I allow things into my life that do nothing for anyone but me, especially as a woman and a mother in this patriarchal society? We don't really allow this. And so I think the love languages are fantastic. I want to understand my partners. I want them to understand mine. And I also want to get really curious about how I can grow the other ones. I want to get really curious about why those are different on vacation than they are in a work day. Why those are right? Like, to get this yummy curiosity and this sense of, like, what can I do to love myself more here? What can I do to love you more here? It is just so much fun. So I would invite everybody who's listening to know their love language, but to not live within those limits. the label
This
of it.
this is important because I believe that having these discussions again, it does not totally eliminate. We're not going to totally eliminate, stuff. So we just got to be fucking realistic. Like, I hate when people act like, oh, this is going to totally stop such and such. Stop. So
Yeah.
I say, let's focus on working towards elimination. Like,
Yeah.
there's no perfect person. There's no perfect, none of that stuff. We can strive for perfection,
Mm-hmm.
being mindful that, you know what, if you don't achieve it, that's okay. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I want you on this podcast talking about the things that you specialize in, because it plays a part into reducing and possibly eliminating in your relationship, not all relationships. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about your relationship, how you apply it, how applicable these things that we're talking about that you coach on, because you're the expert on these things, it can help eliminate domestic violence situations by doing the things that you're talking about, doing the things that you train and coach people on. It can help reduce the traumas that people in relationships bring to those relationships. Talking about baggage, folks. So if you have been sexually offended, traumatized, abused, assaulted, Gina's an expert on helping you deal with those things by talking about knowing your chakras, talking about having these conversations with your intimate partner, talking about getting to know your own body, the breast massage, the genital massage. We're not talking about um, fellatio. We're not talking about masturbation. We're talking about getting in tune with yourself. I want to move forward because we talked about something that I'm going to have you come back on this one on a different podcast episode. Um, when we talked about the hymen and the stuff going on in Iran with the women and
Oh,
how
yeah.
women
Like a lot of the
are
myths around keeping women
put a
sacred
pin
or,
put a pin
yeah,
in that, because we really don't have the time. And I
yeah,
thought,
yeah, yeah,
what, that plays a part into this other series that I'm doing with Leah Abraham and Dr.
yeah,
Bakari. I want you to be part of that. So I'm gonna put that on the shelf here. I want to move down to action plans and trauma informed dialogue, because I always say dialogue by itself is just trauma dumping. We got to have some action plan. What type of
yes.
action plans do you come up with your clients?
Yeah. So when my clients come to me and they really want to connect to their feelings, they want to connect to their sexuality, they don't feel safe, they've had a lot of past trauma. One of the major things is they just don't have the skills, the tools to regulate their nervous system, right? Their adrenals are engaged. They are not always fully aware of what's happening right now. A lot of people who listen to this podcast understand how trauma manifests in the body, how the brain tricks you into thinking this is a right now current event instead of like what we would easily call in relationships like old baggage, right? When I notice this and I can bring people down to ask questions, right? All you need to do, here's what I think people get so fearful of doing a lot of this work is they feel like it's exactly what you just said, LP. There is no perfect solution. There is only managing reactions, like so you said you're not going to eliminate it, like this is the same with trauma work. Like, we're not going to eliminate human trafficking, we're not going to eliminate domestic abuse. You take so many steps in getting to reduction and then eventual elimination, right? But that this podcast is not going to eliminate these things for so many people who are suffering. And if we offer ourselves that same sort of forgiveness and allowance, that we don't need to come all the way down to resolving the conflict when we're triggered. All we need to do is come down from this reactive state to this place, so that in here lives our good communication skills. It lives our conscious, thoughtful process, our ability to pause, our ability to make good decisions, right, is here. And when we're in a reactive state, we don't have access to any of these tools that we've learned so much, right? And so a lot of women who come to me, they understand while we're having conversations like this, how trauma affects their life. What they don't understand is simple tools that when they're activated. So let's say like somebody comes to me and they shut down in sex with their partner and they don't want to do that anymore. And so then teaching them the tools like different types of breathing, right? About mindful connection. Sometimes it's about if they have a very conscious partner and they're triggered, right? Because a lot of sexual trauma will come out in these heightened states of sensuality and sexuality. So when you're engaging in a sexual encounter with somebody and you think you've worked through all of your shit and it comes up, it's going to come up there. It's in you, and to think about it. And so we practice these in sessions of when this comes out, to welcome it with loving compassion, as if we're saying goodbye to it, right? It's coming up and out. And how do you do that? With breath, with mindfulness, with this awareness, with this ability to use like a meta vision, right? Like, so you see what's happening, you rise up a little bit and you think like, okay, I'm reacting to this and it's because this past pain is leaving me. Am I safe right now? Do I feel safe in my body? What can I offer my body safety around? And it's, again, practicing these things when it's not hot. So you can use them and they're wired in. That's a neuro pathway when you don't need them. So like, for example, every day for 30 days, you use this self-pleasure practice where you use your throat chakra to clear some of this that's coming up for you. And you do that every day for 30 days in self-pleasure or in like the shower or whatever. It works best if you're doing something similar. Like, so I am now talking about self-pleasure. I'm talking about masturbation because that's a process of sexual healing. And the place you can do it first is alone, in this offering of this safety, right? And that way you're burning in new pathways so that when you do get triggered in partnership, either a long-term or with somebody new, your go-to is to use your breath and your body to get you back down to regulation. It doesn't mean like, okay, now all my problems are solved and it's never going to happen to me again. It just means like, how can I get to neutral? How can I get to fine? And from there, you can then move back into pleasure, or you can decide with your partner, let's call it a day and try it again tomorrow or whenever. That's empowerment, right? That's empowerment. Empowerment does not ever mean nothing bad ever happens to me. It means I have tools to know that I will be fine no matter what happens to me. That's where I want everyone to be.
That's awesome. I got two more questions.
Okay.
Three questions. I'm sorry. Safety to surrendering. What does that mean?
Safety to surrender. Yeah. This is a really good one because one of the components of like orgasmic pleasure, let's just say bliss or something, of feeling the maximum amount of pleasure in partnership or in personal pleasure, is the ability to surrender. Okay. And so surrender means you have to feel safe enough. So you have to know that you're safe enough to lose control. You have to know that you're safe enough to relinquish control of a situation. And that could mean I don't have to sound a certain way. I don't have to be moving or looking a different way. So like not having a lot of judgments around yourself. Or that could mean like the unknown, like you just don't know. But so being able to surrender to the unknown is how you get maximum pleasure. And so, what was the wording that you used?
The surrendering.
Yeah. Did you have another word in there, like a verb or something, or the?
Oh, I said surrendering. That's what I said.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So the ability to surrender, the ability to feel safe in surrendering, is how we get to the most pleasure. If you're trying to control a situation all the time, you'll stay sort of between in the middle range of pleasure. There is so much more. And that component involves surrender. So a lot of my practices, like we were talking about the mindful practices and things like this, and a lot of the tantric philosophy revolves around, how do I feel grounded enough to surrender in this moment, in my mind, in my body? Takes practice.
I'm taking so many notes here. Like, even I'm adding on to the stuff that we talked about in this pre-interview. Second to the last question.
Yes.
If you could write a letter or an email to little Gina Catherine.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
What would you say?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So many things, right? Like, I would say so many things. And I've done this, like I've done this inner child work, but I think I would say, weird is good. I would say your power is in your uniqueness. Don't close yourself off. Don't disconnect from the thing that makes you unique to fit in, right? Don't because this causes a lot of lostness, right? We suffer when we're disconnected from ourselves. So I would say to little Gina Cat, to the little kitty cat, I would say, yeah, don't lose your sense of originality. Like, stay 100% weird. Maybe that's what I would say.
Gina, I love that. Look, I got your social media links, your IG. I got your well, it's not Linktree, but it's similar to Linktree. I got your that information.
Bio site, yeah.
Yeah, bio site. I'm going to put that information in the show notes for this particular episode. I want to thank you so much. I'm going to contact you again. Probably, I'll send you an email about. I want you to be part of this ongoing series that we got, stigmas, taboos, and stereotypes, talking about the childhood domestic violence. We have a 3-part series that's going on right now that we're working on. We got the first 2 out the way. We are working on filming part 3, and this is focusing on worldwide childhood domestic violence.
Yeah.
With Dr. Rosina Bakari. Leah's part of that. I want to get you to talk about what's going on in Iran.
Yeah.
That deals with a lot of the stuff, the domestic violence and the sexual-based offenses. I definitely want to get you to talk about that because we had a great conversation about that. But we're going to go ahead and close up here. I want to say peace and blessings be upon you and your family forevermore. You got an open invitation to come back anytime. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Gina Catherine, folks.
So excited to be here, LP. Thank you so much for having me. I always feel like so invigorated by our conversations. And I think your work is so important and so needed. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much. And I will see you in these clubhouse streets.
Yay! Love the clubhouse.
Peace and blessings. All right, folks, that was Gina Catherine. You can pick her brain anytime by going to her social media links. You can also pay her. She'll be your coach, your sex, love, and relationship coach. I'm going to put the link into a case about a young man. His name is SHAWN Cornelius ALSTON. He is a missing person from Graysburg, North Carolina. I got the information here on the screen. I'm just going to read it real quick because we always do a missing person case. So this is from the Charlie Project. SHAWN Cornelius ALSTON. He was missing October 18, 2012. Missing from Graysburg, North Carolina. Endangered missing is the classification. A black male at 39 years of age, 5'7", 185 pounds. He was wearing a black shirt and khaki cargo pants. He suffers from asthma. He was last seen at 11:30 on October 18, 2012. He went out drinking with a friend, became very intoxicated to the point that when he tried to walk back to his home in the Warner Bridge Road area near the Virginia state line, he started to go the wrong way and had to be stopped and helped to go in the right direction. He never arrived home and has never been heard from again. Austin's mother, who died in 2016, believed her son may have been robbed and killed on the night of his disappearance. His case remains unsolved. If you have any information about SHAWN Cornelius Alston, contact the Northampton County Sheriff's Office at 252-534-2611. Again, Northampton County Sheriff's Office, 252-534-2611. For Gina Catherine, live in awareness, never live in fear. Keep your head on the swivel. It's not a matter of if, but when and where an active violent incident is going to occur. So be prepared. Always take a first aid, CPR, stop the bleed class. For the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, I'm your host, LP. And as I always say in closing, peace and blessings be upon you forevermore. LP.